For the sake of the sect, I confined myself in a forbidden place for 500 years. But now that I have returned, everything has changed. The master despises me, the senior sisters loathe me, and the new junior brother has replaced everything that once belonged to me. However, through an illusion, I saw events that will occur 10,000 years later. From then on, I abandoned the sect with a single letter of resignation. I transformed into a wandering cultivator, seeking my own path. But just as I was singing along the way to conquer the heavens, the former master and senior sisters tearfully begged me to return to the sect. To this, my response was only one sentence. Your beloved junior brother had already died 500 years ago. It was your choice. Not long after, Tsurume once again called her subordinate back and asked in a low voice, "Have you found out the details about Feng Bugui?" The subordinate looked troubled. Tsurume raised an eyebrow. Why? Still can't find anything? Yes, the subordinate said with a bitter smile. This person, Feng Bugui, it's as if he appeared out of thin air. Where did he come from? Where is he going? Which sect does he belong to? Whom is he acquainted with? We couldn't find any information. We couldn't even verify the name Feng Bugui. We haven't found any traces. Can't find anything? Tsurume frowned. Wenbao Building doesn't mind doing good deeds, forming good relations. But for Wenbao Building to exist for so many years, it's naturally impossible that they only do good deeds. At the very least, investigating people's backgrounds and probing into their past is a common practice. It is definitely something that will be done. The result, we couldn't find any information about Feng Bugui's identity. She frowned. The subordinate immediately bowed his head in shame. It was my incompetence. Please, Manager Su, punish me. It's not your fault. Tsurume shook her head. He claims to be a wandering cultivator, heading to Yangshao City. This indicates he has not been a wandering cultivator for long. As for the name Feng Bugui, he probably chose it as an alias. Bugui, free like the wind, yet does not return. The meaning is quite clear. He should be a disciple who left a certain faction, not wanting to be entangled with the past, becoming a wandering cultivator. Since he intends to hide, it's normal not to find anything. Tsurume became a manager at Wenbao Building, not solely due to her cultivation. More so, it relied on her sharp mind. She quickly analyzed a lot of information. However, the subordinate found it somewhat amusing. Manager Su, a small cultivator at the 4th level of chair refining. Even if he left a sex faction, it's still an insignificant matter, right? He even took the trouble to choose an alias. Is that necessary? Insignificant? Tsurume shook her head. If he were truly an insignificant person, he wouldn't be able to face her. Foundation establishment cultivator like Ren Qing, without wavering. Moreover, at this stage, he could enter the state of enlightenment. This person is likely not only far from insignificant, but also very special. These words made the subordinate pause for a moment. Then he asked Manager Su, should we continue to escort him on the journey? Why not? We should not only escort him, but also treat him with respect. Arrange a separate carriage for him after he finished his enlightenment. The subordinate was stunned, somewhat incredulous. A separate carriage is reserved only for those at least at the great perfection of chair refining. Does a cultivator at the 4th level of chair refining qualify for this? Wenbao Building seeks to make connections with heroes from all over the world, not with ordinary people. If he were an ordinary mortal, there would be no need for special attention. But this person is so extraordinary. Even if he is not a hero, he is definitely not an ordinary person. If we don't make connections with him before he rises, should we wait until the future, when it will be more difficult to associate with him? As for his current level, Tsurume glanced at the carriage. Can you be certain that after his enlightenment, he will still be at the 4th level of chair refining? These words made the subordinate pause again. Then he suddenly realized, yes, the greater benefit of enlightenment is the establishment of a Tao heart. But at the same time, the 9 extreme whirlpools of spiritual energy are continuously absorbing spiritual energy. With such a terrifying absorption rate, to what extent could Guzyu advance? Entering enlightenment at the chair-refining stage. It is extremely rare. Entering enlightenment at the 4th level of chair-refining is unheard of. Usually, foundation establishment and golden core cultivators entering enlightenment can at least break through a minor stage. But for a small cultivator at the 4th level of chair-refining, with a danshin and chassis not that large, it would likely result in a terrifyingly high advancement. Meanwhile, at the Qingshuan Holy Land, on the Mashu Peak, facing the desperate questioning of Nyan Chao, the faces of Qin Muren and the other 2 women were now extremely embarrassed. The 3 women each bowed their heads, each looking at their toes, unable to say a single word. They always thought that it was Guzyu who had changed. But at this moment, looking at the scenes in the celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror, they understood in their hearts that for Guzyu, it was probably they who had changed. For a brief moment, a trace of doubt arose in the hearts of the 3. Is this really me? How could I have changed to this? Clearly, 500 years ago in the mirror, I was still crying my heart out, watching Guzyu enter the Forbidden's place, praying to heaven for Gushu's safe return. But why, when Guzyu truly returned, did everything change? Where did it go wrong? Speak up. Dear junior sisters, why did you suddenly stop talking? Senior sister Qin Muren hesitated for a moment, then spoke. It's actually Gushu's fault. What? It's Gushu's fault. Nyan Chao was stunned. She looked at Qin Muren as if she were looking at a monster. She didn't understand why Qin Muren would say such a thing. It was clearly their fault. I know! When Guzyu just returned, we indeed neglected him. We're inattentive to him. But from another perspective, was Guzyu really blameless? Qin Muren pursed her lips and said, Senior sister, Guzyu was in the Forbidden's place for 500 years. A full 500 years. During these 500 years, whenever we sisters talked about Guzyu, we would be in tears, in deep sorrow, unable to eat or sleep, worried all the time. In the end, we had no choice but to convince ourselves that Guzyu was already dead. Only then could we avoid falling apart. Hearing this, Su Wanqing and Lu Qingyao couldn't help but nod repeatedly. Even Nyan Chao felt the same. Then the junior brother arrived. But Qin Muren continued. We placed all our longing for Guzyu onto the junior brother. We gave everything meant for Guzyu to the junior brother. To put it bluntly, we treated the junior brother as Gushu's substitute. This was actually very selfish. Senior sister, have you ever thought about what it feels like to be treated as a substitute? If Guzyu eventually came back to the junior brother, how great a blow would that be? Nyan Chao frowned. So this is the reason you isolated Guzyu? Don't you think this is ridiculous? Just because you didn't want the junior brother to feel sad about being a substitute, you treated Guzyu like that. You were all concerned about Zhongzhen, the junior brother. But did you forget everything Guzyu once did for you? Everything Guzyu once did for the sect? These questions brought a moment of silence from the 3 women. They hadn't thought much about it before. But hearing Nyan Chaoxi's questions now, the 3 were unsure how to respond. They couldn't answer this question, no matter what. At this point, what is there left to say? Besides, Gushu's previous actions, do they not clearly show that our choice was correct? It was still Lu Qingyao. She couldn't face Nyan Chaoxi's questioning, but knew how to defend herself. She knew how to defend herself. Perhaps at the beginning we did neglect Guzyu and did isolate Guzyu. That was indeed our fault. But does Guzyu have no fault at all? Senior sister, look at what he did afterward. If it was just because we neglected him, he targeted us in this way. Then in that case, I think there's nothing wrong with what we did. Hearing this, Nine Chao was incredulous. She instinctively looked at Su Wanqing and Qin Miran, hoping they would have a different opinion. But to her disappointment, Gu Xu's subsequent actions were indeed very wrong. Su Wanqing shook her head and said, Qin Miran even nodded. I said it before. After that incident, I could never forgive Gu Zhu in my lifetime. Nine Chao suddenly felt extreme heartache. She took a deep breath. Nine Chao did not open her mouth to scold, did not question loudly. After a moment of silence, she softly said, You say, Gu Zhu wronged you afterward. In that case, let's see. How exactly Gu Zhu wronged you? As she spoke, Nine Chao was about to activate the celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror to continue watching. But to her surprise, I still have some matters to attend to. Even if you let me continue watching, I don't have the time right now. I need to help the junior brother complete the construction of the beast pens for the beast taming technique. I must take my leave. Throwing out these words, junior sister Lu Qingyao was the first to leave hastily. Reminded by this, Su Wanqing also immediately stood up to take her leave. Senior sister, batch of pills I'm refining should be about done. I need to go back and take care of it. 281. As for what you mentioned, let's watch it next time. The two women left one after another, and when they left, they didn't give Nyan Chao a chance to speak. By the time Nyan Chao reacted, the three women who were originally there had already left too. Nyan Chao knew they dared not continue watching. Or rather, they should be clear in their hearts about the scenes that would appear next. But Nyan Chao, who guessed these things, could do nothing to stop it. She could only turn her gaze to Qin Miran. Will the fifth junior sister also have something to do? Qin Miran frowned, hesitated, but then decided to be straightforward. Senior sister, I know what you want to say. You hope we can go with you to plead with the master, to let Gu Zhu return to the sect, to let Gu Zhu come back. I don't oppose this, but I won't support it either, since you already know what Gu Zhu once did to me. Then you should know. Gu Zhu once destroyed my path. The enmity of breaking my path. I can never forgive him. Her path of talismans had completely stagnated because of Gu Zhu. No matter what, she could never forgive Gu Zhu, much less feel any guilt towards him. Nyan Chao understood all this, but at this moment, she was not disappointed. Instead, she said, I have always believed the junior brother must have his own difficulties. Since you believe Gu Zhu wronged you, fifth junior sister, why don't we use this celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror to see the truth of the matter? Senior sister, is this really necessary? Qin Miran frowned. It is necessary. Nyan Chao nodded. Very seriously, I have always believed that Gu Zhu is not as terrible as you say. Qin Miran frowned. Actually, she didn't want to argue with the senior sister anymore. But this was Mashu Peak, her territory. Su Wanqing and Lu Qingyao could make excuses to leave. But where could she go? This mirror can not only see the past, but also answer questions. The celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror will give answers based on the questions asked. Since you believe Gu Zhu harmed you, fifth junior sister, then this time, I won't deliberately control the mirror to find answers. I'll directly ask the mirror. As Nyan Chao spoke, she began to activate the spell. Soon, beams of light emerged from the celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror. Nyan Chao controlled the celestial wheel of reincarnation to search the past, to find the truth about Gu Zhu sabotaging Qin Miran's spiritual induction. The images quickly appeared, but to Nine Kaoxi's surprise, instead of showing Gu Zhu sabotaging Qin Miran's spiritual induction, the mirror showed no such scene. On the contrary, the images in the mirror started to rewind. It went back to more than 500 years ago. Junior brother, we have just started learning the path of talismans. The first thing we need to do is to remember all the common heavenly and earthly Tao rhymes, then we need to keep writing and comprehending them. This book on talismans is something I got from the master. I specially copied it for you. This way, we can learn the path of talismans together. In the future, we will both become talisman masters. The image in the mirror showed a young Qin Muren and Gu Zhu. It was 500 years ago, when Qin Muren began learning talismans and took her junior brother Gu Zhu along to study with her. Nine Chao was puzzled. She had asked why Gu Zhu sabotaged Qin Muren's spiritual induction. But the answer given by the mirror was this. What does this mean? Did Gu Zhu's sabotage of Qin Muren's spiritual induction have something to do with his first learning of talismans? Nine Chao was confused. The images in the mirror continued. The two began their practice of the path of talismans. But for some reason, young Gu Zhu did not learn step by step from the beginning. Instead, he started with the later, more advanced parts. Soon, the images in the mirror began to change. This time it was of Gu Zhu again. It was clear that more than 500 years had passed in the mirror. It was about Gu Zhu returning from the forbidden place and living on Zhuo Peak. 394. Gu Zhu was still looking at the talisman book given to him by Qin Muren when she was young. Moreover, he was still looking at the later pages. What is he doing? Nine Chao was somewhat confused. His cultivation was completely wasted. At this time, he should have been studying the path of talismans at Mashu Peak. I said, why hasn't he made any progress in the path of talismans over the years? Turns out all these years, he has been fixated on the later pages. Qin Muren said coldly, her eyes full of disdain. Nine Chao frowned. She felt things weren't that simple. At that moment, a thought struck her. She started searching in her storage ring. Previously, when Gu Zhu's wooden house on Zhuo Peak was damaged, Nine Chao had packed everything up. After some searching, Nine Chao quickly found the talisman book that appeared in the mirror. It was an introductory talisman book that recorded a large number of known Tao rhymes of talismans. It was handwritten by Qin Muren. Following Gu Zhu's example, Nine Chao turned to the later pages. Sure enough, it was as Qin Muren said. All recorded were divine-grade Tao rhymes of heaven and earth. These Tao rhymes, even if one learns them, are useless unless one successfully induces a spirit. Otherwise, no matter how many are written, it's all futile. Even if Qin Muren wrote them now, it would still be useless. However, this book is quite comprehensive. It not only contains a large number of known Tao rhymes of talismans, but also some detailed introductions, especially the divine-grade Tao rhymes above the 6th level. There are so many differences in the later divine-grade Tao rhymes. Each divine-grade Tao rhyme has its own special ability. Nine Chao was somewhat surprised. Qin Muren nodded. Divine-grade Tao rhymes are unique and naturally different from other Tao rhymes. Her expression was still unpleasant, especially when looking at a particular Tao rhyme. Nine Chao looked down and found that what Qin Muren was looking at was a divine-grade Tao rhyme named Za. Could this be the divine-grade Tao rhyme that the 5th junior sister missed during her spiritual induction? This is spiritual induction. The 5th senior sister is undergoing spiritual induction. That's great! The 5th senior sister finally has the opportunity to achieve spiritual induction. Once successful, she will enter a completely new realm. While Nine Chao was contemplating, she saw Gu Zhu in the mirror speaking. Looking over, she saw Gu Zhu, who had been carving a wooden sculpture in the room, suddenly sensed something and began to speak to himself with a look of surprise. Nine Chao couldn't help but feel nervous, because she knew the time in the mirror was when Qin Muren was undergoing spiritual induction. That means Gu Zhu was about to be controlled by the spiritual Tao injury and fall into madness. Sure enough, just as she was thinking this, she saw Gu Zhu in the mirror, who had originally planned to go out, heading straight to Mashu Peak, suddenly let out a muffled groan, almost stumbling torment from the Tao injury appeared. Guzu was in unbearable pain. Holding his head, he began to roll on the ground in agony. It seemed the pain was so intense that his eyes were no longer clear. He was about to fall into madness. Just as she thought this, Gushu's body suddenly stood up, and he was about to rush out the door. But at the door, Gushu's hands suddenly grabbed the door tightly. His eyes alternated between clarity and madness. And he said with difficulty, "Today is the most important time for the fifth senior sister. I must not go mad. I must control myself." Saying this, he suddenly gritted his teeth and slammed the door shut. Then he took out chains and wrapped them around himself. This scene made Nyanchao tear up. Even Chinmuren, seeing this scene, had a slight change in her expression. If not for the celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror, no one would have thought that Guzu would bind himself like this to avoid disrupting Chinmuren's spiritual induction. But unfortunately, everything Guzu did was in vain. Because just as Guzu was about to completely lock himself up, the clarity in his eyes finally disappeared completely. He completely entered a state of madness. Then Guzu, covered in chains, rushed out the door. It was as if he were being guided by some force, heading straight for Mashu Peak. Gushu's journey was staggered and stumbling, because he seemed to be constantly struggling with the spiritual Tao injury. Along the way, he would occasionally regain clarity, trying to stop himself from moving forward. But how could a mere mortal resist the spiritual Tao injury? He ultimately took step after step toward Mashu Peak. It was as if it were fate, inescapable. No matter how hard Guzu tried to stop himself, he couldn't resist at all. Chinmuren's expression was equally complex. But soon, the complexity was replaced by a cold look, because Guzu in the mirror had arrived at the entrance of a courtyard. At that time, Chinmuren was in the courtyard undergoing spiritual induction, but just as Guzu was about to step in completely, one of his hands suddenly grabbed at his own chest fiercely. The grasp was extremely forceful. In an instant, flesh and blood flew. He wanted to use self-harm through pain to regain his clarity, but in a short time, Gushu's body was so mangled by his own doing, he looked like a tattered rag doll. Seeing this, Nyanchao was already crying uncontrollably. She wanted to stop Guzu from self-harming, but this was the past in the mirror. These were events that had already happened. As for her now, there was nothing she could do to stop it. She could only watch. Watch as Guzu nearly tortured himself to death. Even Chinmuren, with her cold eyes, showed some reluctance. This scene was too shocking, leaving her unsure how to continue hating. Anyone could see how determined Guzu was. In the mirror, despite torturing himself so crazily, Gushu's consciousness seemed to finally regain control of his body. But he had no time to catch his breath, no time to scream in pain. He just glanced quickly at Chinmuren, who had her eyes closed the entire time. Her hand sensing and writing the divine grade Tao rhyme. Close call! It seems the fifth senior sister has gained the recognition of this Tao rhyme. I almost ruined her chance at spiritual induction, Guzu muttered to himself. Then he quietly left the courtyard, pulling the courtyard door shut. He wanted to close it and leave. From beginning to end, he never looked at his own injuries. All he thought about was not disrupting Muren's spiritual induction. Nyanchao sighed sorrowfully. Chinmuren's expression was somewhat unnatural, but soon, she shook her head again. Senior sister, have you ever thought, since Guzu had already regained his clarity, why did my spiritual induction still fail? Nyanchao was stunned for a moment. Then she reacted, yes. Since Guzu had already controlled the spiritual Tao injury, why did Chinmuren still fail? Just as she was thinking this, she saw Guzu suddenly freeze at the courtyard door. His eyes fixated on the talisman in Chinmuren's hand. In the next moment, he suddenly pushed the door open again and strode toward Chinmuren. Nine Chao had a bad premonition, feeling something was wrong, because she noticed that Guziu in the mirror was frowning, but his eyes were very clear. It was obvious he was not controlled by the spiritual Tao injury. He was lucid. But why would a lucid Guziu suddenly make such a move? While Nine Chao was puzzled, she saw Guziu had already reached Chinmuren's side. At this moment, Chinmuren was in the midst of summoning the divine grade Tao rhyme. She was in a state of sensory deprivation. Even though one hand was continuously writing the divine grade Tao rhyme, she was completely unaware of the outside world. She had no idea that Guziu had already arrived beside her, staring intensely at the talisman she was writing. In the next second, Guziu suddenly reached out, trying to snatch the brush from Chinmuren's hand. What is going on? Why is this happening? What happened? Nine Chao widened her eyes, full of disbelief, full of incredulity. Just now, Guziu was desperately trying to stay clear-headed, trying not to disturb Chinmuren. Why did he suddenly do this? Senior sister, do you still want to keep watching? Chinmuren asked coldly. Nine Kaoxi's lips moved. She understood what Chinmuren meant. From the moment Guziu decided to act, Chinmuren's spiritual induction had already failed. Because spiritual induction is about gaining recognition from the divine grade Tao rhyme of heaven and earth, and fully inscribing it. If this process is interrupted, the spiritual induction will completely fail. Sure enough, as Guziu acted in the mirror, Chinmuren's face suddenly showed a struggle. Then the sky began to fill with dark clouds. In the next moment, Chinmuren suddenly spat out blood and collapsed to the ground. At the moment she fell, a crimson light flew out from her body and quickly dissipated. Chinmuren's spiritual induction had failed. How could this happen? Why did this happen? Senior sister, I don't know why you think so highly of Guziu, but now you have seen it with your own eyes. You should understand, I only have hatred for Guziu. Chinmuren said coldly, expressionless. But Muren. Nine Chao wanted to say more, but Chinmuren sighed. Senior sister, I am tired. Can you leave? Nine Chao opened her mouth. But in the end, she had no strength to argue. She could only bite her lip, put away the celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror, and turn to leave in despair. From behind came Chinmuren's cold voice. Senior sister, I advise you. Guziu is not a good person. He is just a cunning and insidious person good at disguising. Do not be deceived by his appearance. Him leaving is the best result for the sect. Nine Kaoxi's whole body trembled. But then, she suddenly thought of something. She turned back and asked, Junior sister, why, during such an important event as your spiritual induction, was there no one else from the sect present from beginning to end? Chinmuren was stunned, but Nine Chao, frowning, asked again. Guziu was just an ordinary person without cultivation, but even he could see you were undergoing spiritual induction. Could no one else in the sect see it? Why was Guziu able to smoothly travel from Juo Peak to your Mashu Peak with such a long journey in between? Why was there no one to stop him? Junior sister, don't you find this whole thing very strange, don't you? This whole thing very strange. Previously, she had been so focused on Guziu that although Nine Chao felt something was off, she didn't think too much about it. Until now, she realized why Guziu didn't encounter anyone from start to finish. Chinmuren's spiritual induction was so noticeable that even an ordinary person like Guziu could sense it. Why did no one in the sect notice? No one came to check on it. After all, under normal circumstances, at such a time, the master and the sisters, even the disciples of the sect, would voluntarily protect Chinmuren during her induction. But why was there no one protecting her? How could Guzyu just enter Chinmuren's courtyard like that? And even successfully disrupt Chinmuren? Senior sister, have you forgotten so quickly? Chinmuren responded calmly, answering at that moment. That day was the grand birthday celebration of the old sect master of the Yanshan Holy Land. The master took the sisters to the Yanshan Holy Land. Didn't you go as well? The grand birthday celebration of the old sect master of the Yanshan Holy Land. Nyan Chao remembered. It did seem to be the case, but she was still puzzled. What about the other disciples? Even if we were not in the sect, with so many disciples and elders in Kingshuan Holy Land, how could no one go to protect you? Senior sister, what are you trying to say? Are you blaming others for my failure in spiritual induction? To absolve Guzyu? Chinmuren frowned and asked. Of course not. Nyan Chao quickly shook her head. I just feel that something is very strange about this. What is strange about it? Chinmuren frowned deeply. No matter what, I failed in my spiritual induction, and it was Guzyu who personally ruined it. Didn't you just see it with your own eyes, senior sister? Nyan Chao was momentarily speechless. Muren, senior sister knows. You don't want to talk about the failed spiritual induction anymore. But this matter is peculiar. Senior sister feels there might be other reasons behind it. Whatever the reason, it doesn't change the fact that Guzyu ruined my spiritual induction. Isn't that right? Senior sister, I hope you don't bring up this matter again. My path has already been destroyed, and the one who destroyed it is Guzyu. What's left to say at this point? Nyan Chao opened her mouth, but finally closed it again. Nyan Chao left Chinmuren's hall, full of doubts. Coincidentally, a disciple approached the teaching elder, asking, I found that in the talisman book, the descriptions of Tao rhymes above the 6th level, all add a line saying if it's a normal spiritual induction. Does that mean there are other ways of spiritual induction? Stay grounded. You shouldn't be thinking about such things now. Is this something you should be considering? The teaching elder said disapprovingly. But Nyan Chao, hearing this, was also stunned for a moment. She reopened the talisman book she had been holding, the one handwritten by Chinmuren. This book had appeared many times in the celestial wheel of reincarnation mirror just now. Guzyu had been almost always looking at it.